What's up? What's up? Let me show you my newest purchase from the Kia Forum AEW Full Gear show. I was a madman at the merch booth. And these are the perfect for the reveal. Ta-da! Sting for life. I already did a recap show yesterday, but I was jonesing after my caffeine drink. So I thought I'd try a Monday Night Live. I'm still trying to figure out the algorithm for doing these lives. Plus I don't want to cut in on the Dabbleverse time. Because even though I'm not a Dabbleverse stream, it's respect. So Kevin starts his at 1 p.m. 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. West Coast, and then I think Chad had a stream before that. Melton had a stream after that. I think Ray just had a stream, so this is the only time chunk that was available. And not that any of them would care that I'd be costing them likely under 10 people in chat. But, I'm a respectful man. And besides, I have fun doing these. I wish I would have started, much like my comedy career, I wish I would have started earlier. But I didn't. So here I am, freshly showered after Monday night yoga. And I was thinking to myself, because I've been getting a lot of people asking me online, how would you have finished the pay-per-view last night? Because the pay-per-view last night, I said, or Saturday night, I thought the ending was a little flat. Just MJF walking up the ramp. He turns around, waves goodbye to the crowd, and then that's it. And then you have a limping Jay White being helped by the Guns. I wanted more, because the pay-per-view was really good. I think my final grade was a B+. And I believe I said I would have given it an A- if they did a cool devil reveal. Because here's the problem now with the devil. You're kind of stringing it out now. You're stretching it out. So the longer you go without revealing who it is, the bigger the pop has to be now. Because you just can't have it be a mid-carder or someone that's, shine is fading. I know the two most popular choices are Britt Baker and Adam Cole. I personally don't think it's either. And now that you've kind of held off on the reveal for whatever reason, it's got to be a big one. And what up, Lexi Graves? What up? What up? I'm just doing a little AEW wrap up from Full Gear in terms of how I would have done the final moments of the pay-per-view. And the fact is, there's very few big surprises you can bring in now, because everyone's jumped ship except for a few people. And I started thinking, I'll assume that Ziggler, Mustafa Ali, and Matt Riddle, they had a 90-day compete clause. So the next pay-per-view that AEW will have, I don't think they'll do the Devil reveal at the December pay-per-view, which is in Long Island. But maybe they will. I don't know. Um, I don't know if I would do it for free on Dynamite, but maybe they will. But I thought a better way to end the pay-per-view would have been MJF goes up to the top of the ramp. He salutes the fans. Total babyface move. By the way, I personally like MJF much better as a heel, but I'll assume at some point he'll go back to being a heel and calling the crowd pores and whatnot. Oh, what up, Lambda, Lambda, Lambda? So MJF does the final salute. Lights go out. He's still doing the salute like he doesn't know what's going on. Wardlow is right behind him. He slowly turns around. Wardlow power bombs him on the stage. Lights go out again. Lights go back up. The Devil is standing not only over MJF, but also Wardlow. So it's a double cross. No reveal. He maybe even flips the crowd, or she flips the crowd off. And maybe it's the Devil and his henchmen or henchwoman. No one really knows, to be honest with you. That would have been a good way to end the pay-per-view because people are talking. Because no one's, with AEW, they still don't have that many pay-per-views. So you got to really maximize the bang for the buck. Now, I was there live. I thought it was a great pay-per-view. If they had done something like that, the pay-per-view gets an A minus. I mean, the Swerve match, as you know, it was match of the night. The ladder match was co-match of the night. Omega and Jericho, they and the Bucks, they were great following the mayhem. Um, the women's matches were good. Even the Zero Hour. I keep on wanting to say Zero Dark 30. Uh, Even the 0 hour matches, the Jay Lethal, Eddie Kingston match was great. Buddy Matthews and Claudio was great. The Guns against Samoa Joe and MJF, great storytelling in that match. Um, so, I mean, top to bottom, there wasn't one bad match. I mean, maybe the Sky Blue Julia Hart match wasn't the best, just in Statlander. I mean, I noticed a lot of people use that to go to the bathroom, including myself, real fast. But I wanted to see the match, so I ran. I took a quick pee pee, and then, because I think there wasn't a lot of. You knew Julia Hart was going to win, and it's hard to judge wrestling based on common sense, but it did make sense for her to win. Um, so it's kind of hard to watch a match when you don't. There's no surprise at the end. Like Jericho, I figured Jericho and Omega would win. But Hangman Swerve, I thought Hangman would win, and then they go for a rubber match. Because now they can't really do a rubber match between the two. Um, you know, and then a huge fan of the Osprey signing. I thought for a second it would be Rousey just because, um, she's in Ring of Honor now. So I thought, oh, that crowd would have popped hard in LA for that. Um, or I thought maybe Mercedes Moné, because I saw her get hurt at the New Japan show in Long Beach. That was a legit injury. When it happened, I'm like, I think she just broke her ankle. Like I was sitting at the perfect angle to see it when she lost to Willow Nightingale. So, her and Ziggler are probably, if I'm a writer in AEW, I'm telling Tony Khan today or tomorrow or whenever, hey, listen, the pop's got to be huge. It just can't be a normal guy or girl that people are used to seeing. So it'll be interesting to see where they take it from there. 'Cause I don't think Tony Khan has a lot of writers back there. I think it's pretty much just him, and I heard maybe Sanjay Dutt, and I'm assuming Jarrett and Jericho have some say in, the storylines, but, like, I would love to be a writer for AEW. 'Cause, like, I'm a fan, but I'm a realistic fan. I think someone just asked me a question on Twitter. You feel free to ask any questions. Um, see, a Desert Yeti. Earl, what do you think about Sting having the championship once before he retires next year? Um, like, as a huge fan of Sting, I bought the gloves. It would kind of be cool to see him go out as champion, but it's not realistic. It's just not. You can't have a 64-year-old man, even as athletic as he still is. You can't have him beat MJF or Jay White or Kenny Omega or Will Ospreay. I mean, you could maybe sales pitch me Jericho because they're not around the same age, but you know, since Jericho's a little older, um, I mean, in terms of who I would want last match to be, that's a tough one because it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the big selling point is it's his last match, and I don't think Sting will be like Ric Flair, where he's going to wrestle forever. Um, I mean, I would want it to be someone who sells for him. You know, I mean, you could say him and Nick Wayne. Oh, I'd be so good, Lexi, because like I said, uh, like I'm a fan, but I'm a smart fan. I'm not saying make Sting champion. But, maybe Nick Wayne, Nick Wayne would sell for him. I noticed that Saturday night in the match, Nick took a few bumps, making Sting look like a total rock star. Uh, I mean, you could have Darby Allin do a heel turn against Sting. Uh, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, you could do MJF versus Sting. Non-title match, of course. Thank you, Fajita Cologne. I do enjoy doing them. It took me a while to come around to it. I guess part of it was I was embarrassed by my kitchen being the background, but I think I've, done a little better with the painting and the Earl sign and the brother love doll. I might have to replace that with the Kenny Omega doll I just bought. I mean, not doll, action figure. Um, so I'm gonna try and do also more non AEW talk, just because basing a stream completely on AEW probably doesn't maximize the number of views I could get because there's a large portion of my fan base, and that is small to begin with. That doesn't watch wrestling, and if they do, they watch WWE, which I just can't watch anymore. I've tried. I mean, I do like Dominic as a heel and Rhea, but I don't know. I just like AEW's roster better, and the matchups are fresh. Like you look at Edge, Adam Copeland. Uh, just there's so many fresh matchups for him in AEW. You could do Edge and MJF. You could do Edge and Kenny Omega. Edge and hell, even like Sammy Guevara. You know, he disappeared. I'm assuming his wife had the baby, so he had this um, last few weeks or last month off, and hopefully the baby was born and everything's great. Um, and then with Mercedes Monet, I mean, I really wanted to see Mercedes Monet against Jade, but that's not going to happen in AEW or WWE. Um, but you could, if the women's division brings in, I mean, it looks better, Lexi, than just my kitchen in the background. But my plan is to eventually move upstairs into the memorabilia room. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I try and keep it Dabbleverse light, just because there's just many people better at that genre than me. You've got like literally 10 podcasts, all what's up, William Zoom in the house. Um, you've got about 10 podcasts, all talking shit about each other. And frankly, I just have nothing to add. I just, um, you know, I'm not interested in the Stuttering John stuff. And, now you've got I think Melton and Chad going at it again. And Kevin's like the referee. And then, I just don't, um, I'm not into it. I watch MLC and Melton a lot, so, it's entertaining for me because I can watch from a distance, but, uh, I think my niche is trying to get those people that, "Hey, if you don't like all the negativity and all that stuff, come over to me," and not I don't wanna take anyone from that world, but, like, "Hey, if you need a day off of that talk, come talk wrestling and, hockey," certainly is a niche sport. The Kings won tonight against the Arizona Coyotes. The NHL should be embarrassed that there was a professional sports team playing in a college hockey arena, and they couldn't even fill it tonight. 4,000 seats. You have an NHL franchise that can't fill a 4,000 seat arena. Uh oh, Peter Brennan in the house. Uh, so yeah, but I mean, I think eventually, my background will be, this, that, couple more dolls I have, maybe even an apparent ray gun. Uh, maybe we'll play. Can't really see it, but that's the Comedy Store record player right there. My name's right there. Kind of cool to have your name on something that's a rare item of sorts. I'm not sure if you can buy them or not. Yeah, yeah, I'll be, the new setup, which is probably a ways away because I have to sell some memorabilia still to clear out the space. But it will um, eventually be a nice, because I started looking at other podcasts like Theo's background is I'd like to have something like that. Um, Delia's background, I do like his setup. Um, I was supposed to actually go over to his house and check it out, like around 2020, because what was going on with him was still kind of like, nobody knew, and I just can't now. Will AEW reach the mid '90s WCW game? It's tough. I mean, they're pretty close. I mean, they did show Peter with. Um, the London show, All In London, that they are capable of putting on a major stadium show. And I was there Saturday night at Full Gear. It was completely sold out. Um, a great card top to bottom, literally from the dark matches to MJF and Jay White. The ladder match was insane. Swerve and Hangman completely bonkers live. I don't know. I want to watch. I want to order the pay per view on TV and see how it looked on TV. Um, but when Swerve, no Hangman, it looked on camera like he was drinking um, Swerve's blood. Like that was like insane. And some funny moments with Christian giving Ric Flair the nut shot, and the ladder match was all 8 guys got their shine on. Where usually in a ladder match with 8 guys, they're 1 or 2 don't get they don't get the rub because it's just there's 8 people in there, but all 8 looked good. Now the ending was a little off to me, and I talked about this on last night's stream. The ending was basically Ricky Starks just bonking Cash Wheeler with the belt, and he fell down, and then him and Big Bill retained the titles. Now, what I would have done, and this is where I think Tony Khan would benefit from having me or someone like me um, on staff, is here's the ending. You have 4 ladders in the ring, 2 guys on each, obviously, doesn't matter who. You could you have Big Bill and Brody King on one ladder, you have, Malachi Black and, uh, Dax Harwood and then, Cash Wheeler and Ricky Starks. Um, and then one by one, it's like dominoes. Brody King hits Big Bill, they fall down. Next to Malachi and Dax, they fall down. Like something cool to go, okay, this is a good spot. Um, but all in all, I'm nitpicking a little bit. I mean, well, I don't know how it looked on TV, the Hangman Swerve uh, on the stream. But live, it was like I remember saying to my buddy, like, "This is crazy, man." Like, there were a couple times I had to look away. I think it was when Swerve was going to give Hangman a power bomb. No, not a power bomb. I'm trying to think of the name of the move. A tombstone. I think it was like a reverse tombstone onto the table of barbed wire. I'm like, he can't do this. That's too dangerous. And bam. And then he gave Hangman his finisher on barbed wire, when he stomps on your chest or face. That gotta hurt a little bit. Like, I don't know if the barbed wire is gimmicked, where they put like plastic caps over the sharp parts, but being lucky enough to be backstage at XPW shows, I know XPW, they don't gimmick their barbed wire. It's barbed wire. So, I'll assume AEW gimmicks it a little bit to make it a little softer, but, that gotta hurt. Um, what up, Ching Lee? I don't know if that's a takeoff on Chong Li from Bloodsport. I don't wanna get kicked off my stream because your first name is awful close to a racial, whatever. Earl, who was your favorite luchador in WCW? I did like La Parca was funny to me. El Dandy, Peter, you really are an old school fan. I would say my favorite luchador. I mean, Juventud Guerrero was pretty good. La Parca was funny to me. What was that dance he would do? Let me try and see if I can do the La Parca dance. Um, uh, but yeah, I'm trying to think. It's been a minute since I've seen. I mean, obviously, Rey Mysterio was great. Um, El Dandy and Silver King were good. I mean, WCW had, AEW definitely has the potential to, I think, take a bite out of WWE's pie. Psychosis was good, no doubt about that. I was more into the big guys, you know, like Mike Awesome, who I compare to Wardlow a lot. Wardlow is like maybe even a slightly more athletic Mike Awesome. So I hope his life ends better than Mike Awesome. But um, I do think that AEW, it's two different crowds. I mean, WWE is more of the entertainment aspects of it, storylines and whatnot. AEW is more wrestling. So if you want to see a good match between, say, Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega, Jay White and MJF, um, you know, you go to AEW. Um, and I do like AEW's jobbers better. Like it's almost like AEW is in on the joke. Like they had that guy last week. I think it was on Collision uh, with Samoa Joe. He looked like a writer, like, and it was pretty funny. And then those two guys, the '80s tag team. They look like total '80s. I forget their names. They're newer. I know they butchered Mike Awesome in WCW. The Fat Chick Thriller, the the '70s guy. Just because you want to see prime Mike Awesome, see his matches. I think what was the guy's name in ECW? Tanaka, think. I'm pretty sure that was his name. I mean, they were wrestling for real, man. It was all power moves and like the ECW is, yes, yes. I thought those. Yeah, I mean, if you watch those, I watched one the other day and like I think Mike Awesome power bombed Tanaka on like a guardrail, and it was like legit. Like you can't fake that. Guardrail's a guardrail. And he got, they each get a move on each other, and then he power bombed Mike Awesome through like a pretty rough looking table. Um, so those are, but that swerve Hangman, uh, it was pretty close to ECW level, and at one point, um, XPW level. I mean, there was a shot of Swerve bleeding. Like, when you're dark skinned, brother, it's hard to see if you're bleeding. Like, I'm not trying to be funny or like goofy. It just is. And like, it was very noticeable. And then the shot of Hangman drinking the blood or letting the blood come pretty close to his mouth is like, that's like wild. Um, I mean, you gotta want, who do I think who's most likely to work for AEW? Jimmy Cornette or Russo? I mean, Tony Khan's a fan. People forget, Tony Khan is just a fan with money. So I'm sure he likes both guys. I mean, I think Cornette would be better for AEW because I think he's probably more respected in the locker room. Like Jim Cornette came up to MJF said, "Hey, I got an idea for you." I think MJF would be much more willing to listen than if it was Russo. I mean, Russo, he was just there in WWE at the perfect time. They wanted the raunchy storylines. They wanted the brawn panties matches. They wanted that shit. I don't know if you could do that in AEW. Like, it's just a different era. Um, and I think the talent is like, why would I do that? Not get paid that much. Like, you look at the bunny, the bunny was like I'm sure someone told her, "Hey, you're gonna make a lot more money on OnlyFans and your whatever." I can't if she wasn't married, I would join her OnlyFans, but I can't creep on some dude's wife. Uh, so I think that, um, you know, WWE back then, the talent didn't have the option of OnlyFans. I think it was Paige Van Zant said she made more money in 1 month on OnlyFans than she did her whole UFC career. And someone else said that. I forget who else. Because I have a friend of mine who's on OnlyFans. She's got like giant tits, and like she is, I guess you'd call her a cam girl. She makes 100 grand a month on OnlyFans. I believe her. Well, I mean, I'm sure she's in bras and stuff, and I think she said the bunny I'm talking about. There'll be no nudity. So I mean, if she said, "Hey, listen, there'll be topless shots," I'm sure she can make a lot of money. But she's a very good wrestler too. So like she's in one of my favorite AEW women's matches ever. I mean, I would say uh, Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa when they both bled. That's probably my all-time favorite women's match. But I would say the Bunny in that one match, it was like a four-way, I think, where she bled a lot too. Was You don't have to have you can ask away, Peter. There's only 9 of us here, so who was the hottest WWF diva? Mine was Jacqueline, true to my Brennan last name. Um, I mean, I don't really have a type. It's like even when people try and set me up with girls, it's hard because I don't it's not like my type is blonde, big boobs. I've dated brunettes with no boobs. So I'm trying to think in WWE. I like that girl, and once again, I'm not trying to be funny. The girl who killed herself, Ashley Massaro. I might be mispronouncing the last name. She was on Survivor too. Like, that's someone that I was like, "Yeah, I'd ask her out on a date if I saw her on the street." But I'd also ask King Queen Kong out on a date as well. Um, but Jacqueline's hot. I mean, obviously, Stacy Keibler, like, when she was in WCW as Miss Hancock, it's like, wow. But you said WWE, so well, she went to WWE eventually. Um, I'm trying to think, old school, WWE valets. They didn't really have valets a lot in WWE until, like, Sable and that. I liked, I remember, who was it? Jimmy Garvin's, valet Precious, mid-80s, of course, later on, Gorgeous George with Macho Man, Major Guns. Probably the saddest thing I've ever seen was I went to an XPW show where Major Guns was the Sandman's valet, and the Olympic Auditorium, I don't know how many people that sat, I'll guess around 5,000. Um, I mean, I don't think it sat over 10 for sure. It's now a Korean church, by the way, off the 5. Every time I drive by it, you can feel like, man, Hulk Hogan used to wrestle there. Like you could feel it. But so I went to an XPW show there. There was maybe 100 people in the arena. Like it was so poorly attended that you could literally hear people on the other side of the building talking. Um, and Major Guns walked out with Sandman. I'm like, oh, I felt bad for both of them. You asked out the lady who was taking a dump on the sidewalk. No, she wasn't my type. Hello. I mean, Miss Elizabeth was beautiful, obviously. Precious was Jimmy's. Okay, but who was the other one? There, because they had that great storyline. It was Precious and the other blonde. I might have to get Jimmy Garvin. Try and get Jimmy Garvin on here. Um, I liked some of those mid '80s storylines with women in like AWA, World Class Championship Wrestling, NWA. The Missy Hyatts Missy Hyatt was so hot back in the day. Um, I had the biggest crush on her. Um, and then I almost got into a fight, or I did get into a fight with her boyfriend at the time, Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years. We were playing Wally ball at the gym. Now, Wally ball, I don't know how this didn't catch on a little more, but Wally ball was volleyball in a racquetball court. And the games got really intense. And one time I was playing against the kid, Jason Hervey, who was dating Missy Hyatt at the time, and he kicked the ball at me because he got mad I spiked it on him. I just remember grabbing him by the shirt and not letting go. And then I just remember looking at him saying to myself, Jesus, this is the brother from the Wonder Years. What am I doing? And then we became friends. Not like good friends, but because I'd see him at the Kings game a lot. Yeah, I mean, well, Macho Man was married to Elizabeth, and then I don't know if they dated, but in WCW, his valet was Gorgeous George, very pretty girl. I'm not sure what happened to her. Of course, if we're going non-WWE divas, I mean, Francine and ECW, uh, Medusa, but Medusa was a wrestler, so I don't know if she counts as a valet. Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch the Wonder Years, but Fred Savage's brother, like the guy who was always kind of a dick. He actually ended up being a nice guy. There's a wild gym I used to go to in Beverly Hills. It was on for you local yokels. It was called Family Fitness. It was on Roxbury and Pico, and I lived by there. A while, Robert Downey would be in there randomly. Yeah, Dawn Marie was hot too, and the prime of ECW. Who else? I mean, obviously Sunny, was so sad what's happened to her. Um, there's been so many yeah, that's some great ECW had some funny shit going on. Chrissy was a wait, who's I don't know who you're talking. I don't want to lay yeah, very funny. I think my favorite ECW segment was when the Dudley Boys were in the middle of the ring, and then Sid Vicious walked out, and Bully Ray, well, I don't want to say what he called him, a big dumb piazza, and then Sid power bombed both of them, and then he was kind of like, well, it wasn't a match; it was just a promo interruption. But then Spike Dudley came out and Sid power bombed him 3 times, really hard too. I mean, Spike Dudley was not a big guy. I can't imagine. Oh, you're talking about Chrissy Mayer. Oh, see, I thought you meant Keanu Reeves show up. Like, see, I'm not Peter Sky Parker. This is not Dabbleverse free talk, but I do try and avoid that world. Uh, usually we've done 35 minutes right now. Usually the trolls are in here by now, but this was not a scheduled chat. The Kings had a good game. I had a good yoga class. I was feeling the energy, and thought, I'll do a random Monday. Maybe this will be a regular Monday Night Live chat where it's just not AEW talk. Because there'd be thousands of people. If you don't watch AEW, why the hell would you go on a YouTube stream and listen to it? You can bring up anything you want, Peter Sky Parker. I don't really get in, and I know I would get many more viewers if I started roasting other people in that world. I'm in a good place in my life. Sorry, I got 7 screens open, running multi alt ops. It can get. I love it. I love it. I used to be like that too. I literally would watch MLC, Chad sniping MLC, Melton sniping Chad, sniping Kevin with my friend uh, Matty Goldberg, and we would like be texting each other. This is crazy, man. Um, but I don't have the energy to watch multiple things on YouTube anymore. What up? Oh shit, Trapper9, one of my for those of you wanting some of my hockey friends in chat, Trapper9, the great well, I don't want to say your first name, Trapper9, because I don't want to be accused of doxing, but the hardest shot in Southern California ball hockey history. Bank on that. Thank you, Pooter. I hope you stay for the. We got 13 people in here. Maybe I will do. That's a lot for me. But see, if this was a Dabble versus adjacent uh, show, they'd be making fun of me for only having 13 people. But yes. Well, Bob and I had the hardest shots in our league, but we were usually um, playing on opposite ends. But toward the end of Bob's tenure in the SoCal Ball Hockey Association, we were on the same team, and there just weren't enough balls for us. Like, you got the hardest shot on the point. I probably had the hardest wrist shot, so it was a tough day for goalies. I don't talk a lot about my hockey days on here because that would really drop off the viewers. But if you want to see Daddy in action, look up Earl Skakel slap shot on YouTube, and I tried to carry the torch for Mr. Trap because ball hockey for a long time was like the only non-comedy thing I would do. Um, yeah, I knew where you would miss, so I would just park on the right side of the net or the left side of the net, I guess. I love you, Nick the Mean. So the because I'm getting a lot of DMs and well, no one has my phone number. Although I did give out my phone number once on a roast battle podcast. I was feeling it. Um, why am I doing so many streams now? I just want to try and build up a following. It hit me the other day after 23 years in comedy and being relatively funny. I should be more known. Not famous, but just, I should be more known. And people ask me all the time, well, Earl, when are you going to do the road? you can't do the road if clubs don't think you have a following. So that's why I'm trying to just build up the fan base a little bit more, so people follow me on or subscribe to me on here. And I have seen a big bump in subscribers. I think 2 weeks ago I had maybe 1,500 subscribers, which is pretty good for not trying. And now I'm close to 2,000. So in 2 weeks, getting 500 subscribers when you only had 1,500% or 1,500. So that's a pretty big jump in 2 weeks. I'm pretty happy with that. So, and then I haven't gotten that many followers on Instagram, a couple more. TikTok's a couple more, not many, to be honest with you. Twitter's gotten a substantial increase. I would say uh, for the longest time, I was hovering around 11,800. And sometimes I'd dip below, and then sometimes I'd one or two. But I think most of the bots and whatnot on X, I should say, have been found on my site. So I'm pretty much all organic on Twitter. Like I went on Social Blade, where you can see how many real followers you have, and I think I'm at like 96% on Twitter, and pretty close to that on Instagram. Um, yeah. Oh, I would love. I wish I was a Miami Vice villain. Yes, Tracy. I know. I will. Nick. Shout out to Tracy Camazo, very funny comedian from New York. She got the flu. Um, well, I try and be likable, but YouTube is a dark world. When you get into these chat rooms, this is a good chat room because everyone's here. They're not here for the shit talking, or they're not here to say this person sucks, that guy sucks, this girl's a whore. And I know that if this chat was like that, I'd probably have 50 to 100 people. But I'm not about that. I'm also 55. I'm not going to online roast someone. Um, like I've said before, you want to say something bad to me, you suck or whatever, say it to my face at the comedy store. I'm not a hard guy to find. Um, and I'll even get you the free tickets. I'll get you free drinks, get you a nice seat, and then you can come back in the green room and I'll say, all right, let's pretend it's a chat room. What do you want to say to me? Uh, Um, I know Lambda, Lambda, Lambda. He's one of my loyal listeners. Well, I mean, I had a few dark. I probably played a little too rough at times at Garden Grove ball hockey. The ball hockey, it's still there. Me and Bob. Oh shit. Me and Trapper. Um, I mean, I have tried to remember in my prime playing in Garden Grove with Trapper. I think Saturday. Yeah, sorry about that, Trapper. I slept. I guess you can't delete that out on a live stream, but um, I mean, I remember playing in games Saturday morning at 7 a.m. I think my peak was I was on 5 or 6 teams, and so was Trapper. So we'd literally be out there Saturday and Sunday all day. And I think the last game on Saturdays was 8 p.m. I mean, you literally would be out there all day, but it was fun. The games were wild. They were pretty rough, but they were a lot rougher in the old location. Uh, I mean, Buena Park, basically. I mean, I remember one time in Buena Park. It's funny how you can remember the random things. And against the team, pretty much an all Asian team from South Pasadena, and they had this really small goalie. And I was a little rougher back then, and so someone lobbed the ball for me to run under it, and the goalie kind of comes out, and I could have avoided him, and I just barreled into this guy. I mean, I knocked him over like a tumbleweed, and I go and get the ball in the corner, and the ref, Chris Wilton, I'll never forget, just whispers only where I could hear him, "Great hit," and this was the ref. Um, does he know OJ's mailman? No, that was the ice hockey thing I did on Sunday nights at the Culver City ice rink. Uh, I don't think he would mind me saying his name. OJ's mailman was the great Bruce Thomas. Um, Wild guy, about 240, 250, but had a shot that was unbelievable. Um, and I also that was the same league. It wasn't a league, it was just a Sunday night pickup where I played with Rocky George, the guitar player from Suicidal Tendencies. And I remember one night, right before Guns N' Roses popped, he's like, "Man, you gotta get into Guns N' Roses, man." I was just in the studio across from them. They're gonna be the next big band. And I remember trying to tell him how the band Britney Fox was gonna be the next big band. And he looked at me like the black guy in the Caddyshack in the boat when he saw the boat coming at him. Um, Rocky was right. Uh, no, I was the big well, they were small. I mean, they could have all known karate, but they not really. But there were some brawls in that league. But back then, and Trapper will vouch for me. And I'm sorry if this is boring to some of you, Glenn. You're talking about a ball hockey league you played in 25 years ago, but for me and Trapper, it's really fun memories. Um, Back then, there were two referees. Pops, who was a in shape older white guy. He was like a bicycle marathoner. Really sad about Pops. He ended up getting hit by a truck. He was a fanatical bicyclist, and he drove over a hill one night, and the sun was in his eyes, and he literally just flew into a truck and ended up being a quadriplegic and passed away a few years later. But he was one of my good friends back then, and so he was a ref, and they had this gigantic black ref named Ray, and Ray would have a bottle of black velvet in his back pocket, and he would drink during games. But I remember one time I got into a fight with this guy, Jeff Kerr. It's so funny, when you can remember these names you haven't thought of in 30 years. And Ray was so strong, and I was pretty strong back then, like just like 88, 89. I was jacked. Uh, but I mean, I was like my size now, but twice as muscular. Ray had me and Jeff in individual headlocks going, knock it off. Yeah, Mish is another one who passed away. I think I played in that. I played in some ball hockey tournament in Vegas. Um, for Vegas, but we did a warm up game in Corona. Man, that was a far drive for ball hockey. But yeah, I remember going to visit Pops he's basically in a hospice, like a home for quadriplegics, and like I'm talking to him, and I see his colostomy bag, but at the time I didn't know what it was. I'm like, that's when I almost started crying in front of him because he was like so athletic and so like for an older guy. And when I say older guy, I mean I was probably I probably just turned 20, 21 years old, and so he was probably in his mid 30s. But to have someone that athletic and that into fitness just be just reduced to a shrinking man in a wheelchair was really sad. Uh, I mean, me and Trapper, like, I started in that league in like '88, maybe, and I still play occasionally, but I'm semi-retired just because it's the drive really more than anything. It's just like an hour drive there, hour drive back. So I'm 2 hours in a car. I'd rather be doing a stream or writing jokes or whatever, and then the game's an hour or whatever. So I just don't have the time I used to. But my body also, I almost got into a fight with a 20-year-old kid in the Tuesday night league about a year and a half ago, and I'm like, all right, I got to step away. In my defense, he did cut me in the face twice. I'm like, hey man, once is an accident, twice you're doing it on purpose. You do it a third time, I'll fuck you up. And I started shaking him because I grabbed him. I wasn't gonna hit him. I just wanted to scare him. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That was a weird team, man. It was a team full of kids and their dad, and they were like a religious they were like from a religious cult or something. So after every game, even though like one guy called me the F word, like Piazza, and then after the game, he's like, "Hey man, I'm sorry. I love you." And he was like it was like Heaven's Gate or something. Um, yeah, well, there's no ranks around me. There's one league in Mar Vista, which is about 15 minutes from where I live, which was great. We used to do these great Saturday pickup games with a whole new group of players that I didn't know, like a bunch of Canadians, and I think Gretzky's kid came out and played with us, and there was this Slovenian. I mean, there's no pro ball hockey league, but this guy played in the pro league in Slovenia, and like to see this guy play, like wow, it was pretty impressive. But those games were at Saturday at 9 a.m. Now, if you guys know me, I'm not a early riser on any day, but especially Saturday, because usually I have a spot at the comedy store Friday night. So to get and I would force myself to get up, and it was great because about 2 hours later, the 10-15 minute drive home, and I'm back in bed. But those Garden Grove, which is basically a suburb of Orange County, I almost drove off the road several times coming back. I was so tired. But, I do miss it because I get to see it's really the only non-group of comedy friends I have, so it's great to, uh, just sit in the inner circle, which is what we called it when we after the games were done, we'd all just talk and make each other laugh, and, you know, uh, no one cared about I mean, everyone cared about the business because they weren't in it, but, like, there was no competition, like, uh, but, I may have one last Ilya Kovalchuk-like run in me. Who knows? Um, yeah, but it is cool, to play in a rink. You get the ice hockey feel. I know. What was it? It was right across the street, basically from Knott's Berry Farm. A lot of laughs back then, and I probably wasn't ready for the physical play back then. I mean, there was like full checking. And like there was a lot of older guys in the league, and they were rough dudes. And there were like I remember I got into a fight once, like a full on fist fight, and there was this real hustler of a guy who owned the league named Craig Fautre, and he's like, "Yeah, just come by Saturday, sweep the rink up, and if you want to make a bet with my bookie, we'll call it even." Um, and he sold me a bootleg Nick Osaski Cincinnati Red shirt. He told me he wore it, but he ripped me off. So that's why I don't mind doxing him. Craig Fautre. Look him up on Facebook. Don't do anything stupid, but I don't mind exposing people who have wronged me. I'm like the Israeli Mossad. I don't forget. I'm sure Craig hasn't thought of me in 30 years. Not me. I'm like the I'm like the Mossad team that went and got all the people from the '72 Munich Olympic massacre. They got them all. Took them 20 years. That's me. That's me in the world of comedy. Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? He probably doesn't even remember, but I do. Uh, yeah, well, he did because I was a Cincinnati Reds fan, so he somehow got a Nick Osaski game worn jersey. And when he gave it to me, it said "Property of Cincinnati Reds" on it. But looking back, he could have gone to Kinko's or whatever was the shop back then. Trapper, you might know what the Kinko's or Office Depot or whatever it was back in the late '80s, and just got a stamp that said that. But you live and learn. Um, yes, I mean Vinnie Vincent. Pitched that documentary the other day to someone. They were kind of interested. I have 2 documentaries I'm pitching right now, one about Eddie Nash, the orchestrator of the Four on the Floor murders with John Holmes, and loosely played in Boogie Nights by Alfred Molina, and then played by Eric Bogosian in Wonderland. Show you what a scumbag Eddie Nash is. He was the number one cocaine dealer in probably the West Coast, and he knew girls liked the booger sugar, so he wouldn't sell it to them, but he would come. He was just a sick guy. He would have them come over to his house for parties, and he'd take a dump. He wouldn't wipe his ass. He'd say, "Lick it clean back there, and I'll give you some blow." What a great guy! And I did pitch the Vinnie Vincent documentary, and it's a the guy was like, "It's pretty interesting, but we'd have to obviously get him to be on board with it, and it'd probably be better if we could get Kiss, on it and play the music. But Gene, he's going to want a lot of money for that, and so who knows?" Uh, well, I like doing stand up too much, but I do think I have a good ear for what would be a good Netflix style documentary, and I do think Eddie, because you've never like I had someone on my podcast once. I won't blow them up, but and this will be pretty easy to figure out who it was, but this way you can't say I said his name. I had someone from a band that had played Eddie Nash's club, the Starwood, which is on Santa Monica and Crescent Heights. It's now a Russian deli, but back then it was a huge nightclub. I mean, the Cars played there, Billy Idol played there, Debbie Blondie played there. A lot of punk bands like the Germs and Fear and the Circle Jerks played there. A Cheap Trick played there. It's more or less where Van Halen got their start in the LA scene. A lot of people think it was Gazzarri's or the Troubadour, but it was actually the Starwood. Where Motley Crue kind of formed when they were called London. Um, and so he's so influential in that music scene. And he was a real scumbag. Like he owned, I think he still holds the record for liquor licenses in Los Angeles. At one point, I think he had like 30, which is unheard of. Now, I don't know what it's like where you guys all live, but to get one liquor license can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it probably wasn't that much back then, but it was still like a lot. So to have 25 to 30 of them all running at the same time, it was payoff city. Uh, and like he had a 21 and under club called the Odyssey, and I think if you go on YouTube and look up Eddie Nash Odyssey, there's a good not a documentary about it, but a good like YouTube video about it. And it's funny now because the building is still there, but it's now a Lens Crafters. And I'm like, I'm wondering if the people who go in there to buy their bifocals know what went on in that club. I mean, because it was a weird, like it was 21 and under, but like there were 14-year-olds in there. But he was so smart as a businessman. He said, well, if we have, there was some crazy thing he did where he would pay all the people go. They didn't have an entertainment license, so they couldn't have bands or a dance floor, but he paid every person $1 that came in there, and so he could say, "Well, we can't have dancing because 'cause they're performers," or some scam like that, and then when it started losing money, he just torched it. Oh, there's great money in code. Uh, oh, I mean, the history, though, when I walked my dog Lois Trapper by the Starwood, like, because they kept the, top of the building, like the little, looks like a Taj Mahal, I don't know what that thing is called. You can just sense the history there, like, I just look into that building and just go think that's where Van Halen got started, like, it's crazy, and now it's a Russian deli, and I think there's a in the parking lot where the club was, and it looks a little different now. There's like a massage parlor which checks out. There's like a coffee shop, and I think that dry cleaners. Um, but and when you walk by the Odyssey, which is if you're ever around Beverly and La Cienega, and you see the Lens Crafters, that's where the Odyssey was. He also had another. 21 and Under club in the Valley. It was the Seventh Veil or something. Um, oh, Jake Hudson coming in late. Jake, you always come in when I'm about to. Um, we're just talking LA history here, Jake. Um, so yeah, look, possibly those two documentaries are in the works. But the problem with Eddie Nash is that, like the one guy was telling me, is like you'd have a, if you did a true documentary on him and it was an honest one, you the rating would be a problem. You can't tell that assy story, and it's not going to be a G rating. Not that they rate documentaries, but like, you know, you're talking about major corporations like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon. They're going to be like, I don't know if we could put that on the air. I'm an AEW guy. There's no WWE talk in here, Jay. Just kidding. But I don't like. I don't watch WWE, so my wrestling streams are AEW. These are my Sting gloves I bought for $25. And I went to GameStop to get some video games, and look what I walked out with: a Kenny Omega limited, limited edition Street Fighter doll, or I'm sorry, action figure. And I had a friend of mine was like, "Oh my god, that's super rare. You could sell that for a lot of money." I'm like, "Not really. It only costs $26." So, and I wouldn't sell it anyway. I'm Kenny Omega for life. So, well, it is fascinating. I mean, when you just think of, but getting back to the guy who played the Starwood that was on my podcast, I said, I forget exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of, "Hey, you played the Starwood. Any cool Eddie Nash stories?" And he shot me a look like it was a audio only podcast. And he's like, so that just goes to show you how intimidating he was. And I think he had just died around the time of this interview, and he still, my guy, still didn't want to talk about him. Um, I mean, that whole world, you're right, Rebel, is fascinating. I mean, his bodyguard was Gregory Dials, a 300-pound ex-football player who was like a karate master. Um, and just the fact that he owned so many different. I mean, he was a brilliant. I mean, a scummy guy for sure, but a brilliant businessman. I mean, because his nightclubs, they catered to gays, straights, rockers, punk rock. You know, I mean, the Starwood would have like almost. They would have country music one night a week. What? How do you go from Billy Idol and prime Billy Idol and to the Germs and Leaving and Fear and probably I don't think Henry Rollins played there, but like people like Henry Rollins, the Plimsouls, and then you got like Glenn Campbell, or I don't know if Glenn Campbell played there, but like I'm sure it was people like Glenn Campbell. Um, I think a lot of people are scared of Eddie Nash. Let me see when he died here. I don't like to do this stuff on online, but I am a one man operation. Nash. Let's see. He died August 9th, 2014, which was ironically right around the time. Hold on, I got Lois's mom texting me. Let me just make sure Lois is okay. Uh, Lois is okay, so never mind. Yes, Eddie Nash died 2014. So that was right around the time I had this guy on my podcast. So that just goes to show you how intimidating he was. I mean, he bought out jurors, judges. I mean, he was the real deal. Um, but I do think, a documentary would be cool. Now, I know Michael Connolly, who is the creator of the Bosch series, he's doing a docu series on Nash. So I might be a little late to the party. And I know Michael Connolly will do a great job. I mean, I'm a big Bosch guy, um, but think that for an Eddie Nash documentary, unfortunately, probably the best people to interview for that are dead. Like, it'd be great to get someone who worked at the Starwood, but that's 40 years ago. I think it closed in 1981, maybe, under a mysterious fire. Um, so you got to figure, let's just say if someone was 30, the manager, let's say the manager of the Starwood was 30 years old, he'd be 70 years old right now if he's alive. So, but it would be cool to, I know like Gene Simmons went there a lot. That's where he says he saw Van Halen for the first time. Paul Stanley was there. Nikki Sixx played there. So it'd be fun to interview those guys. I don't know if they'd want to go on the record about Eddie Nash, but I was at not Sunset Studios, Sunset Sound about a year ago. My friend was doing a commercial jingle. It's pretty neat. She was doing it in the same room as Frank Sinatra played. I think they call it the Sinatra room. Uh, I mean, it should be good, and if Michael Connolly's doing it, I mean, I'm bummed he beat me out to the punch because 'cause I've been trying to figure this, documentary out for years, and really the main thing is people saying, "Dude, it's gonna be too graphic," and I mean, you'd have to tone it down. I'm like, "You can't tone down a documentary on Eddie Nash." It's like, he's a fucking scumbag. You can't make him seem it's not that people wanna make him seem like a better person, but, like, you know, you the underage girl stuff and, that was going on. So, like, it would be great to interview a girl who, like, went to the Odyssey, but, how the hell are you gonna find out who they are? Uh, Kiss is still on tour, I believe, December 2nd is their last American date at Madison Square Garden. But I don't know if, Glenn Campbell played the Starwood, you know, it's possible, I guess. But, I mean, I was just using him as an example, like, Eddie Nash wanted anyone to play his club that would make him money. I mean, he'd have Mel Tillis open up for the Circle Jerks because, hey, we'll get both audiences. Um, and I believe there is a Facebook group for Starwood employees, and it's pretty cool to see the pictures. I don't know. I guess if you just looked up Starwood Club on Facebook, you'd find it pretty easily. But it's I although I'm sad I got beat to the punch. If you're gonna get beat to the punch on an Nash documentary, Michael Connolly is a pretty good guy to lose out to. Uh, oh, I love a good documentary. There was a really good documentary. I saw it maybe 2 years ago on Amazon. It was only like 25 minutes about Michael Dokes, the boxer from the 80s, because he kind of fell, in between the cracks, between Larry Holmes and Mike Tyson, and I forgot how good he was. Like he was really good. And I was a heavyweight boxer type guy. Ron Lyle, my favorite. I'm going to read his book one day. It's called Off the Ropes. One of the great. You talk about someone who should get a movie. Like Ron Lyle was in prison for 7.5 years, gets out, fights George Foreman in the greatest 4.5 round fight you'll ever see, heavyweight or not. If you YouTube Ron Lyle, George Foreman, you'll see the whole fight. I mean, this is a wild fight. It was literally the human rock'em sock'em robots. Um, and then who else? You had Tex Cobb, of course, Michael Dokes, Jimmy Smith, Ernie Shavers, Jerry Quarry. I mean, it was a great. I mean, if you think about the '70s boxing that bled into the early '80s, there was an era of boxing before Mike Tyson, and yeah, I mean, Dokes. I think he might have been. He partied a little too much. I mean, Ron Lyle was ahead on scorecards with Muhammad Ali, and then he just got tired. Um, but if you look at like the 70s, you start off with a prime Ali, a prime George Foreman, a prime Joe Frazier. I mean, that's insane. And some of these guys, any other uh, era, they would have been champions. A prime Ken Norton, Ernie Shavers, Jerry Quarry. I'm not saying Tex Cobb could have been a champion, but like he could take anyone's shot. And then you get into the early '80s, Mike Weaver, Mike Dokes, Jimmy Smith, or Jimmy Young. I'm sorry, Jimmy Young. Obviously Leon Spanks. And then Larry Holmes kind of took over that era, and then Tyson, and then the kind of got lost in the weeds in that era after Tyson with like, well, let's not forget some of the other guys: Pinklin Thomas, James Bone Crusher Smith, Tommy Morrison was a great fighter, like merciless Ray Mercer. Well, he wasn't '80s, but um, John Tate was a great fighter. Tex Scott was actually a better kickboxer than he was a boxer. Um, he was always in the mix of top heavyweight boxer with heavyweight kickboxer with what was the guy's name? John something was John Jackson, I think, was like the Mike Tyson of kickboxing back then. Tex is great. I mean, Tex and a great fight scene with Tex Cobb and Patrick Swayze and Uncommon Valor on the beach. Um, Tex Cobb is very good at. I tried to get him on the podcast. He's kind of off the grid. Like, um, I think he graduated from Temple University, so he's not an idiot. Um, and my friend Judge literally said, "I'll find him for you." He couldn't find him, and if my friend can't find you, you're off the grid. Um, I think he had a heavyweight shot lined up against someone. I forget the story of who he was supposed to fight. It might have been Ali. I think this is before the Holmes fight. And his friend got into a bar fight, and Tex Cobb rescued him, but he broke his arm in the bar fight, and then he couldn't fight. Um, well, shout out to Buster Douglas while I'm at it. Um, Let me see Peter McNeely. Let me see who it's John. Let me see if John Jackson was the guy's name. Because I think him and Tex Cobb. Let me see Jackson Cobb kickboxing. Sorry to do this while I'm Tex Cobb versus John Jackson. Yes, a very good fight. How tough was Tex Cobb? Tough. Um, Let's see, Bill Sugarfoot Wallace. Yeah, I've heard of him. Peter McNeely. I mean, he was a tough dude, but then Tyson kind of clowned him in that fight. Jerry Cooney was a tough dude. I mean, Tex Scott was great in the episode "Down for the Count" in Miami Vice, Racing Arizona, Blind Fury, and then he just kind of disappeared. And if you've ever seen you guys know I'm a roast comic, I'm a roast connoisseur. If you've ever seen the Larry Holmes roast on YouTube, Tex Cobb tears it up. And he did a joke involving, it's basically all of Larry Holmes's friends. So outside of him and Jerry Cooney and the MC, it was pretty much all African Americans in the room, probably a couple hundred. And Tex Cobb dropped an N-word joke that was so funny, just mainly because he had the balls to say it in that room, but everyone laughed. So check out Tex Cobb, Larry Holmes roast, and Tex kept it real. So we're probably gonna end the stream now, but I do thank you guys. Follow Trapper9 on X. It's my buddy. And follow me on X and YouTube and TikTok and Patreon and all that stuff. Just my name, EARLSKAKEL, all one word. Yeah, you couldn't hurt Tex Cobb. I mean, Although I did see him fight at the country club in Reseda when he was kinda at the end of the rope and he got, like, knocked out 3 or 4 times. It was like, "Oh, man, he's done." Like, to knock out him once is crazy. But, it was a, kickboxing thing. I don't think it was John Jackson, though. But the country club in Reseda was basically the nightclub in Boogie Nights. It wouldn't surprise me if Eddie Nash had his hands in it. But, thank you guys. We're gonna do, obviously, some AEW streams later in the week. Wednesday Night Dynamite probably should be a good follow-up to the Full Gear pay-per-view. And then I'm not sure if I'm gonna do AEW streams for, their Friday night show Rampage unless something good happens. Collision maybe, if it's a good card. Oh yeah, those. Well, I had Don Fry on before I go. Don Fry was one of the first celebrity. Sorry about that. Don Fry was one of the first celebrity guests I had on the podcast. Inappropriate Earl, still out on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud. Um, he was great. Gary Goodridge would be a great interview. The guy who wore the one boxing glove, he'd be a good interview. Henderson or something. Um, you know, Tank Abbott, he seems to do. Maybe I'll try and reach out to Tank Abbott. We can talk a little WCW wrestling with him. Don is the real deal. I sat next to him at Rob Schneider's wedding, and it's kind of funny. Rob was like, "Hey, I'm going to see you this summer. You're going to like at my wedding." And I just assumed Skakel, Seinfeld. It's pretty close. Uh, it's all alphabetical. And then I sit down, and this huge guy in a cowboy hat. He's like, "Are you Earl?" And I was like, "I bet I could kick your ass." And he put me in an arm bar with no problem at all. I'm like, "I was just kidding." He's like, "I wasn't." Uh, yeah, I mean, I understand why the early days of the UFC can't happen anymore. 3 or 4 fights in one night, no weight classes. But I do wish for like one night only they would go back to the original UFC one rules. It's a Wild West, man. You gotta understand now you can get the pay-per-views and watch them, YouTube, you can watch it. Back then, you had to go to, like, Best Buy 2 months after the card had happened and buy the VHS tape. Um, Joe Son, you get him and who else? There's a guy who just died, Paul Verhoeven. No, that's the guy who did, Lethal Weapon. Paul Varha or something. He was a fucking maniac. I think Thomas Hernandez was the cab driver that UFC literally found on the street to fight Don Fry, and he got knocked out in 9 seconds. The good old days. Um, you didn't appreciate them at the time. I know I would literally go to Best Buy and get the VHS tapes, and uh, I'd go home, uh, get a blank tape. I had like some double VHS deck where I could tape, and then I'd return it saying, "Yeah, I didn't really like it." Um, Catherine, I will. AEW is All Elite Wrestling. It's a company owned by Tony Khan, whose dad owns the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they're basically, some would argue this, but it is, I would guess, competition for WWE. They have a lot of older WWE wrestlers, but they also have a lot of people from New Japan, like Kenny Omega, Will Ospreay, the Young Bucks. They also have guys like Chris Jericho. Their women's division is good. You probably don't know a lot of names. Probably their most popular women's wrestler is Dr. Britt Baker, who's an actual real life dentist, but she's a very good wrestler. They also own Ring of Honor, which Ronda Rousey just signed in. So, look for Ronda Rousey, I'm assuming, to be in the AEW ring at some point, which would be big. They also probably will sign ex-WWE star, probably the top women's wrestler right now, Mercedes Moné. Uh, so I would look for her in W or AEW. So it's essentially the second biggest company in the world. It is the second biggest wrestling company in the world, uh, especially now that they also own Ring of Honor. Uh, who's action figure, Mercedes Moné or Ronda Rousey? And then you have what is it? Impact Wrestling. You have New Japan Wrestling. Uh, AEW also has, they have a lot of ex WWE, like Big Bill was Big Cass in WWE. Um, Ric Flair is in AEW at the moment, but he's not going to wrestle. Sting is going to have his last match in AEW. I'll be wearing these. Be wearing these the whole match. Yeah, I mean, in LA alone, there's PWG, there's GCW. I think there's something called Global Force Wrestling, um, XPW, which is new. Basically, they used to be based out here, but now they're based in, I think, in New Jersey. But they do shows once every 2 months here. Which if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see some pictures from every show. So it's a good time to be a wrestling fan. There's a lot of options for people to talk about, and feel free to talk about them in here. We don't have to just talk about AEW, but I figure AEW is a good launching point. And yes, Jericho, my favorite Chris Jericho stories, I saw him at the front bar at the Comedy Store. I tapped him on the shoulder. I'm like, "Hey, Mr. Jericho, I'm a big fan. And he's like, "I know who you are. You're Earl Skakel." And I just turned around and walked out. I just figured, my night's not gonna get any better than that, so I just left. So, all right, guys, you know what to do. Earl Skakel in the house. Follow me everywhere. I'm most active on Instagram and YouTube now. So if you could share the streams and all that stuff, it gets better numbers and all that stuff. Uh, no problem, Kevin. Anytime. I love you guys all. Trapper, good catching up with you. Probably do a stream. Well, probably not Thursday because that's Thanksgiving. So maybe I'll do a live stream of Dynamite Wednesday where I don't think it's legal if we can watch it, but I'll comment on it. The TV's over there, so I can turn the volume down, and maybe we'll do a live stream Wednesday night. Now I'm in LA, but I have DirecTV, so I get the show at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I don't believe if you don't have DirecTV, I think it airs 2 hours later on cable systems. So, thank you guys. This is fun. An hour and a half, pretty much. We went by like that. And I can promise you, I will leave you with this. Love you, Catherine. When I do get to my super chat goal and people can pay to ask questions, I will answer every question, whether it's a super chat or not. Unlike a lot of people in the streaming world, I'm not going to use super chats to hold you guys hostage and say, well, I won't answer your questions unless you pay for it. I will use super chats as like, hey, if you're a fan of my comedy, I've done a lot of free work for 23 years. Think of it as not even a donation, but like, hey, I thank you. But you don't have to do it. I'll treat free people as good as I do the super chatters. So, tune in Wednesday at 5 p.m. LA time, guys. William, Catherine, Pooter, Nick, Trapper, Catherine, Ross Incognito, everyone. Thank you. Peace.